The Middle East remains tense amid this fragile temporary truce, even after President Trump backed down from his threat to eliminate a, quote, whole civilization in Iran.
And joining us now to discuss what's going on, the former Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. Congresswoman, thanks so much for joining us. I know you recently called for the president to be removed from office under the 25th Amendment to the Constitution after that threat that he made about destroying the whole civilization of Iran. The president has a long history of shocking and unprecedented social media posts. Why was this the final straw for you?
Because it's absolute madness. How can any person that is mentally stable call for an entire civilization of people to be murdered, to be wiped out, to never come back again? That's what the president called for. And that shows that there's serious instability.
All right, friends, Dr. John here. So what just happened, guys? Marjorie Taylor Greene, Trump's most visible defender through 2 impeachments, stood before a Republican audience in Texas and declared MAGA dead. Not wounded, not struggling, dead. And the person she blamed for killing it wasn't Democrats or the media or the courts. It was Donald Trump himself.
Now, you see, today, we're in a time where many Americans are realizing MAGA is dead. But MAGA died actually quite some time ago. It really did. MAGA was built by Donald Trump. Make America Great Again was such a dream for so many Americans, and it was sold for years and years, and an industry was created around it, an entire political industry. You see, MAGA went from being words and promises, but when it came time to put it into real action, the actions is what killed it. And do you want to know who took the actions to kill MAGA? It was the creator and the founder himself, Donald Trump. How did it happen? It started with the back door to a central bank digital currency.
This was not a whispered criticism leaked to a friendly reporter under condition of anonymity. This was not a subtle distancing maneuver designed to create plausible deniability while maintaining access to power. This was a public execution performed on stage in front of an audience that rose to its feet in applause. And the person delivering the eulogy was the woman who once described herself as the lead MAGA general, the person who would travel with Trump, who would champion his policies, who would absorb the attacks from his enemies and fire back twice as hard. The person who was as inside the movement as anyone could possibly be has now become the movement's most credible and most damaging internal critic. And the story she is telling, the detailed account of threats and betrayals and moral compromises, is one that every person still clinging to the MAGA identity is going to have to reckon with. The scene in Texas was remarkable, not just for what was said, but for who was listening. This was not a crowd of Democrats eager to hear Trump attacked. This was not a progressive audience celebrating the defection of a former enemy. This was a room full of Republicans and libertarians, people who share ideological ground with the MAGA movement, people who voted for Trump, people who attended his rallies and donated to his campaigns and defended him to their skeptical friends and family members. And they were giving Marjorie Taylor Greene a standing ovation as she systematically dismantled the mythology that has sustained Trump's political dominance.
I was talking with my fiance, Brian, this morning about my speech to you all today. And I said to Brian, you know, Brian, I've talked in front of, well, tens of thousands of people at Trump rallies. I've spoken on television so many times. I've given countless campaign speeches, but I'm actually intimidated to speak to this group today. And I'll confess to you why. You guys are the smartest Americans. You had it figured out way before me. So God bless all of you, and thank you. Well, now that I have figured it out, I know I'm a little late to the party.
When the people who used to be your most passionate supporters start applauding the person calling your movement dead, something fundamental has shifted in the political landscape. What Greene revealed in that speech went far beyond typical political criticism. She opened a window into the specific moment when her loyalty to Trump collided with her conscience, and her conscience won. The Epstein files, she explained, were the breaking point, when the demand for transparency around Jeffrey Epstein's network of abuse and trafficking became a major issue in Congress. Greene explained expected that Trump would be her strongest ally. She had been told, repeatedly and emphatically, that the Epstein story was about Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. That was the narrative. That was the talking point. The Democrats were the ones with something to hide. The Clintons were the ones who should be worried.
When we started talking about releasing the Epstein files, I'm like, this is a no-brainer. President Trump will just roll them out on a big cart himself. Stacks and stacks and stacks of the Epstein files, because obviously Bill Clinton is all in there and Hillary Clinton. That's what I had been told all along, right? Well, it was the most shocking thing when I sat in a conference meeting and I learned that the president didn't want to release the Epstein files. I was like, what? Yeah, come to find out, he was very much against it. So we kept on trying and kept on talking about it, and then the president told Mike Johnson, no, do not bring that resolution to the floor for a vote. He told the Rules Committee, and Johnson told the Rules Committee, no, you will not mark up any bill in the Rules Committee that will allow the Epstein files to be released. And the resistance built and built and built. He told Pam Bondi, don't release the Epstein files.
Trump was going to be the champion of disclosure, the hero who finally exposed the truth about a scandal that powerful people had spent decades burying. But when Greene started pushing for the actual release of the actual files, when she started demanding that the documents be unsealed and the names be made public and the full scope of Epstein's network be exposed to the sunlight, she discovered something that shattered her understanding of the movement she had dedicated her political life to serving. The Trump regime was not going to help her. Pam Bondi, Howard Lutnick, J.D. Vance, the entire constellation of officials and loyalists who surrounded the president, they were not interested in transparency or accountability or justice for the victims of child trafficking. They were interested in protecting themselves and protecting their friends. They were, as Greene now describes them, the Epstein class. They were in the files. They had connections to track. They had relationships they did not want examined. And the president she had defended against every accusation, the president she had stood beside while he mocked his critics and dismissed every investigation as a witch hunt, was complicit in the cover-up. That realization changed everything for Greene. But it was what happened next that transformed her from a disillusioned loyalist into an outright opponent. Trump called her, not to thank her for her years of service, not to explain the political calculations behind his reluctance to release the files, not to have a conversation between allies about how to handle a sensitive situation. He called her to threaten her. He told her to remove her name from the discharge petition she had signed, the procedural mechanism that could force a vote on the Epstein files, regardless of whether leadership wanted it to happen. And when she asked why, when she wanted to understand what possible justification there could be for protecting the identities of people connected to a child sex trafficking operation, Trump gave her an answer that she will never forget. You're hurting my friends. You're hurting the type of people who we hang out with at Mar-a-Lago. Let those words sink in for a moment because they represent the most damning admission imaginable. The President of the United States, according to his own former loyalists speaking in public to an audience of his former supporters, explicitly acknowledged that releasing the Epstein files would harm his personal friends, the people he socializes with at his private club, the people he wants to protect from accountability. He did not claim national security concerns. He did not argue about due process or the reliability of the documents. He said, in plain terms, that Greene understood perfectly that the people who would be exposed by the files were his people, his crowd, his Mar-a-Lago buddies, and he expected her to help him shield them from the consequences of whatever they had done. Greene's response was to refuse. She would not remove her name. She would not help protect the people in the files. She would not be complicit in covering up crimes against children just because the perpetrators were friends of Donald Trump. And that refusal, that assertion of basic moral principle over political loyalty, was the moment her relationship with Trump shattered completely and irreversibly. He started calling her Marjorie Traitor, a play on her name designed to brand her as a betrayer, to turn his supporters against her, to mark her as someone who could not be trusted. The death threats started flooding in, not just against her, but against her children. Her son received threats because Trump had pointed his finger at her and labeled her disloyal, and the most unhinged elements of his base knew exactly what to do with that signal. She went to Trump and asked him directly to tone down the rhetoric, to stop the attacks, to consider what he was doing to her family. She explained that her son was receiving death threats. She asked for mercy, for restraint, for the basic human decency that any person would expect from someone they had served loyally for years. And Trump's response, according to Greene, was as cold and as cruel as anything she had ever heard. Yeah, I know. He deserves it. The President of the United States told a mother that her son deserved to receive death threats because she had refused to help him protect his friends from accountability for child sex trafficking. Not a misunderstanding, not a miscommunication. A clear, direct statement delivered from the most powerful person in the world to a woman who had spent years defending him from every accusation imaginable. This is the story that Marjorie Taylor Greene is now telling to rooms full of Republicans and libertarians who used to be his supporters. This is the account that is drawing standing ovations from crowds who once chanted his name. And this is the testimony that is far more damaging to what remains of the MAGA movement than any Democratic attack ad, or any critical media coverage, or any legal indictment could ever be. Because Greene is not an outsider. She cannot be dismissed as a never-Trumper or a deep state operative or a partisan opponent with an axe to grind. She was the lead MAGA general. She was the person on stage at his rallies. She was the voice defending him on every television network that would have her. She was as credible a messenger for the MAGA cause as anyone could possibly be. And she is now using that credibility to tell everyone still inside the movement that the man they are following is not who they think he is, and the cause they are serving is not what they believe it to be. Greene has also been taking her message directly to the people she believes are still trapped inside the MAGA information bubble. She has been posting on social media, using the very platforms that once amplified Trump's message to reach the supporters who still trust her. Her posts are direct and confrontational. Facts don't care about your feelings. Open your eyes and leave the cult. She is explicitly framing MAGA as a cult, a system of psychological manipulation that isolates people from reality and makes them dependent on the leader for their sense of identity and purpose. She is posting lists of warning signs, the indicators that someone has been drawn into a controlling group that demands loyalty above all else and punishes dissent with exile and threats. She is positioning herself as someone who escaped and is now reaching back to help others find their way out. The significance of this framing cannot be overstated. For years, Trump's critics have used the word cult to describe his movement, and his supporters have dismissed it as hysterical hyperbole from people who simply could not accept his political success. But now, one of the most prominent figures in the movement's history, a woman who stood on his stages and spoke his words and defended his actions against every criticism, is using that exact same language. She is telling his supporters directly that they are in a cult, and that she knows because she was in it too. She is providing the roadmap for deprogramming, the steps to disentangle oneself from the psychological grip of a leader who demands absolute loyalty and punishes any form of independent moral judgment. What makes this moment so historically significant is that it is not happening in isolation. The Ron Paul Institute event in Texas represents something that is quietly building across the country, an anti-MAGA movement composed of former MAGA people who have broken with Trump and are now organizing against him. These are not liberals who finally found an argument that works. These are conservatives and libertarians who have concluded that the movement they supported has been corrupted beyond recognition by a leader who cares about nothing except his own power and his own protection. They are gathering in places like Texas, in rooms full of people who once formed the backbone of Trump's political base, and they are working to build something new from the wreckage of what they helped create. Greene's speech captured this dynamic perfectly. She talked about the MAGA cottage industry, the ecosystem of grifters who attached themselves to Trump and built businesses around selling Trump Bibles and Trump merchandise and Trump-branded everything. These people, she argued, were never really about the cause. They were about making money from the true believers, exploiting the loyalty of the base for personal enrichment, while the movement itself hollowed out from the inside. And the person who ultimately destroyed it all, who killed the thing that millions of people had invested their hopes and their identities in, was Trump himself. He is the one who killed it. He is the one who destroyed what his supporters built. The cause did not fail because of external enemies or media bias or deep state conspiracies. It failed because the leader was never worthy of the loyalty he demanded. This is the argument that is now being made by someone who cannot be silenced with the usual dismissal tactics. When Greene says that MAGA is dead and Trump killed it, she is speaking with the authority of someone who was there, who saw it happen from the inside, who experienced the betrayal personally. She is not theorizing about what might have gone wrong. She is testifying about what she witnessed. The phone call where Trump told her to protect his Mar-a-Lago friends. The nickname he invented to brand her a traitor. The death threats her son received. The moment she asked for mercy and was told her child deserved to suffer. These are not political disagreements. These are revelations of character, and they are coming from a source who has no incentive to lie and every reason to want the movement to succeed. The audience in Texas understood what they were witnessing. The standing ovations were not just for Greene's courage in speaking out. They were for the validation she was providing to everyone in that room who had made the same painful journey from loyal supporter to disillusioned critic. They had been called traitors too. They had lost friends and family members over their decision to walk away. They had been told they were brainwashed by the liberal media, or seduced by the deep state, or betrayed by their own weakness. And here was someone who had been deeper inside the movement than almost any of them, telling them that they were right to leave, that their instincts were correct, that the leader they had followed was not who he pretended to be. The consultation with Ron Paul adds another dimension to this story. Paul represents a strand of conservative and libertarian thought that predates Trump and will survive him. By appearing at the Ron Paul Institute, by associating herself with a figure who has credibility with the exact audience she is trying to reach, Greene is signaling that there is a political home for people leaving MAGA. They do not have to become Democrats. They do not have to abandon their principles. They can find community among people who share their values but reject the corruption and the cruelty and the cult dynamics that have consumed what was once a legitimate political movement. The posting about the Iran war, the connection to Zero Hedge and other far-right aligned accounts that are now publishing anti-MAGA content demonstrates that this is not an isolated phenomenon. There is a growing network of former MAGA figures who are coalescing into something that looks increasingly like an organized opposition movement within the conservative coalition. They are not going quietly. They are not slinking away in shame. They are building platforms and holding events and making arguments designed to peel away the people who are still trapped inside the information ecosystem that protects Trump from accountability. Every time a figure like Greene speaks out, every time a prominent former loyalist tells their story of betrayal and disillusionment, the permission structure for leaving MAGA gets stronger. The message Greene is now spreading through her social media channels is explicitly designed to reach people who are questioning but not yet ready to leave. The signs you are in a cult posts are not aimed at people who already hate Trump. Those people do not need convincing. They are aimed at the supporters who still believe but are starting to notice that something is wrong, who feel the cognitive dissonance between what the movement claims to be and what it actually does, who are looking for permission to trust their own perceptions. Greene is giving them that permission. She is telling them that the doubt they feel is not weakness, it is wisdom. The discomfort they experience when the leader demands they ignore their own moral compass is not a test of loyalty. It is a warning signal that they should heed. The fact that all of this is happening in Texas, a state that has been central to Republican politics for generations and that Trump carried comfortably, is particularly significant. This is not a story about coastal elites abandoning the movement. This is a story about the heartland, about the places where Trump's support was supposed to be strongest and most durable. When the lead MAGA general gets a standing ovation in Texas for declaring the movement dead, the political implications ripple outward through every competitive district and every statewide race in the region. Republican politicians who have tied their careers to Trump's fortunes are watching this and recalculating. If the base is fracturing, if the most credible messengers are telling the faithful to walk away, then loyalty to Trump is no longer the safe political bet it once appeared to be. What Greene experienced personally, the threats, the nickname, the moment when she asked for mercy for her son and was told he deserved to suffer, is the story she is telling to illuminate the character of the man she once served. But it is also a warning to anyone still inside the movement about what awaits them if they ever prioritize principle over loyalty. The leader does not forgive. The leader does not forget. The leader will destroy you and your family and feel nothing about it. That is the testimony of someone who knows because she lived it. And she is now dedicating herself to making sure everyone else knows too.